Happy Monday, everyone. It's time for my daddy's podcast.
Welcome to the Lessons for Success podcast. I'm your host, Adam Wardlaw, middle school science teacher and high school football coach in South Carolina, USA. Thank you for tuning into the podcast heard by nearly 3,000 people across 17 countries, as well as almost every state here in America. These episodes are intended to be short and beneficial lessons to help you get more out of your life. You can keep up with the show on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and even TikTok by searching at L4S Show. And remember, that's the number 4. If you're listening on an iPhone, go ahead and give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts to help keep our growing community going. Now let's start the show. In life, it can be very easy to get wrapped up in what you think is important, only to realize later that you had your priorities out of line. On today's episode, we're going to emphasize the importance of figuring out what's important in life. Welcome back, everyone, and I want to welcome all the new listeners who may be joining the show for whatever reason. Whether your school is currently out and your teacher shot you this link to try and still have an impact on you, or if you're a teacher or coach yourself and you're trying to benefit from these lessons, thank you for tuning in. On Mondays, the goal is to provide some motivation to carry you through the rest of your week. In this episode, I want to focus on a topic that seems more important now than ever, figuring out what's really important in life. Obviously, with the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, a lot of businesses and people are having to arrange their daily schedules, and it may seem as though it's all a big inconvenience. It's important during these difficult times that we set aside our personal preferences and realize what's truly important. That's where today's story comes in. I came across this story when doing some research for the episode, and it's about a philosophy professor who's sharing a valuable lesson with one of his students. Here it goes. A philosophy professor stood before his class with some items on the table in front of him. When the class began, without making a sound, he picked up a very large and empty mayonnaise jar and proceeded to fill it with rocks, about 2 inches in diameter. He then asked the students if the jar was full. They agreed that it was. So the professor then picked up a box of pebbles and poured them into the jar. He shook the jar lightly. The pebbles, of course, rolled into the open areas between the rocks. He then asked the students again if the jar was full. They agreed it was. The professor picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. Of course, the sand filled up the remaining open spaces in the jar. He then asked once more if the jar was full. The students responded with a unanimous yes. Now, said the professor, I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. The rocks are the important things, your family, your relationships, your health, your children. Things that, if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job, your house, your car. And the sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand into the jar first, he continued, there's no room for the pebbles or the rocks. The same goes for your life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you'll never have room for the things that are important to you. Pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Play with your children. Take your partner out dancing. There will always be time to go to work, clean the house, give a dinner party, or fix the garbage disposal. Take care of the rocks first, the things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just sand. Very powerful story here that provides a great illustration of what is truly important in life and what we should be emphasizing first and foremost. As we go through these next several weeks and months, there will be things that pop up and inconvenience things like work and school. As the professor in the story explains, these are just pebbles in our life. Be sure you're filling your jar with the rocks first, your family and loved ones. Because if you put your pebbles and sand, things like job and side hobbies in the jar first, then there won't be any room for what's really important. Stay safe out there during these tough times, and be sure you're giving your best effort to ensure the wellness of your family and others, because they are what's most important. That's all the time I have on today's episode. Thank you for listening, everybody, and I hope you make the show a part of your daily routine during this time and beyond. Feel free to share your comments and thoughts by reaching out to the show on YouTube or our other social media outlets. And I'll talk to you guys on the next episode of the Lessons for Success show.
Time for a quick commercial.
That's right, Ellie. This episode is brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. And they'll even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. Places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. To get started, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm today. Well, folks, that's it for another edition of the Lessons for Success podcast. Thank you for listening. Remember that you can keep up with the show wherever podcasts are found, as well as the newly updated Lessons for Success YouTube channel. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok to keep up with more content from the show. If you haven't already done so, give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. That's all the time I have for today. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the Lessons for Success show.